Chelsea, Chelsea, Chelsea. Hello there guys, what is going on? Daniel Childs back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. It's Monday, hope you've started your week off well. Quite an episode to start the week today, and not the first time Chelsea make us look silly. Not going to be the last in terms of transfer news. I mean, they've made us look very silly this season in terms of the results we've seen. But this, of course, regards Manuel Ugarte. I'm sure you've seen the news by now. Chelsea pulling out of the race to sign the Sporting Lisbon midfielder when reports over the past week suggested Chelsea were very serious and potentially could win the race against PSG for Ugarte's signature. But we're going to go into some of the details, the background, why this isn't just about a player and potentially relates to the multi-club model. What does that say about Chelsea's ownership, my thoughts on it, and also what do Chelsea do now in the transfer window as they clearly want to sign a central midfielder. We're also going to talk a little bit about N'Golo Kante, his future, because that contract still has not been signed and potentially he could still leave Chelsea in the next few weeks, the next few months, which would be quite staggering really given some of the reports we have seen in recent months. If you are new around here, want to see the latest Chelsea content and the usual twists and turns that come with the transfer window, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on so you don't miss any of the content. Please do hit that like button if you're enjoying the content because it helps the channel out as well. And if you're listening on the podcast, thank you so much for tuning in. So as we know, Chelsea pulled out of the race to sign Manuel Ugarte from Sporting Lisbon. Some background on this from Ben Jacobs is that sources have indicated that Ugarte agreed on PSG's personal terms days ago. Chelsea's perspective is that they pulled out because they didn't want to pay above market value for Ugarte, even though the player was keen to move to Chelsea. Important to reflect this side, PSG's personal terms to Ugarte were indeed more lucrative, but as reported throughout, I'm told they are under €5 million a year. PSG sources argue they didn't budge from their offer and instead Sporting tried to put pressure on Ugarte to pick Chelsea because that offer structure was more preferable to the Portuguese club. Part of the reason why they were probably pushing, if you believe the L'Equipe report, is that Chelsea apparently were going to invest in Sporting Lisbon, which is quite remarkable when we think of transfer negotiations. But Ben Jacobs does state that Chelsea have denied that L'Equipe report, suggesting a promise of investing in Sporting was made as any part of any Ugarte negotiation. PSG point to the timing of the withdrawal after that story materialised, but neither club wants to get into a war of words. Just a little bit more background on that reporting that I saw after I uploaded my show last night. Colin Miller reporting that Chelsea claim they were outbid on wages while PSG insists Chelsea approach would have fallen foul of transfer regulations. Chelsea's remarkable play to offer a stake in Sporting as part of the Ugarte transfer was always likely to come under close scrutiny. As reported last year, Boli wants to buy a Portuguese club. So this does relate and has a bit more background to it if we think about the multi-club model that Chelsea's new ownership is looking to pursue. Portimonense, another Portuguese club Chelsea reportedly wanted to buy. There have been other names listed, not just in Portugal. So when you throw it in like that, I mean, it does sound a little bit crazy. We have, George Mendes involved in the deal, and that always gets into quite dicey waters, and Chelsea maybe, wanting to pull out, not just because of that. I mean, we did hear reports last week in terms of the wage structure type thing of Chelsea being concerned on that front. So there could be more to it. I think, again, when you have Bowley's name being thrown up into the conversation and you have criticism of Chelsea doing these wild things in the transfer window, it does, very much fuel that sort of narrative around this Chelsea ownership being a little bit wild, a little bit frantic and doing things that are not the norm and maybe not helping Chelsea's reputation. So I guess, again, it comes down to who do you believe in these reports? Do you believe that it's just a case of PSG beating Chelsea out on certain terms and that's why Chelsea pulled out? Or have Chelsea pulled out because reports have emerged regarding this kind of very weird sense of actually investing in the club when you're trying to just buy the player? In terms of the player, I felt he would have been a good get for Chelsea based on what we've read, based on, what Chelsea need this summer. And I think that's what we go into the next stage of this. It's not the end of the world that Chelsea do not sign Manuel Ugarte. I mean, I've kind of distanced myself from the Twitter timeline. I do post on Twitter, so I don't really know how outraged people are. I can imagine, because everyone gets outraged about everything all the time, that people think this is like the end of the world because Chelsea haven't got a deal over the line. I mean, I don't think it's as drastic as that. I mean, you win some, you lose some in transfer negotiations. I always think in these type of situations, it's what's the plan B? How can you move quickly to potentially get a better deal in the transfer market? And, what are those contingency plans if you can't get a deal over the line? That's just, the reality. And it doesn't really derail Chelsea's plans, massively. It seems like completely now Chelsea are distancing themselves, or at least just aren't being linked at all to Declan Rice, who, has Bayern Munich interest, has Arsenal interest, has other interests too. So now, you move on to the next target. And that target, apparently, is Moises Caicedo. There's Arkansas reporting that Chelsea focus on Caicedo transfer bid after ending Manuel Ugarte talks. He said Chelsea will try ahead of Arsenal and Liverpool for Caicedo as they rebuild their midfield under new head coach Mauricio Pochettino. Caicedo could cost more than 80 million after establishing himself as one of the best midfielders in the Premier League. Chelsea are optimistic, though, they can reach a deal for Caicedo and are thought to have discussed a move for him in talks with Brighton over Levi Colwill. Chelsea, of course, rejected a 30 million bid for Colwill from Brighton last week and have insisted the defender is not for sale. Caicedo is a Premier League proven, I think very dynamic, mobile midfielder that would in some ways, you can match those two players up, Ugarte and Caicedo, and say maybe Caicedo is a better fit because he has that Premier League experience, which is very valuable, but does cost you a bit more. It does feel like Groundhog Day, doesn't it? Particularly when we're bringing up Levi Colwill, that he could be brought into the negotiation and he could go permanently to Brighton and we get one of their players for a big fee. We're right back at the Motka Correa negotiations 12 months ago, which is just crazy. I did say in yesterday's show that I don't think you should be put off completely by Moises Caicedo because Motka Correa didn't work out. Simply because, I think that Moises Caicedo is a very, very good player. And from what I've seen, again, I have a lot more knowledge of Moises Caicedo than I do of Manuel Ugarte. But, I do think that he ticks a lot of boxes again in terms of that energy and mobility and also an ability to kind of play in different positions. But you need someone who's going to eat up a lot of ground. I really do, from what Chelsea need. They need aggression. They need physicality. These sound like basic words. And I know some people get annoyed when you describe certain players like this or kind of prioritize these things. But these are things that Chelsea's midfield have clearly lacked in recent years. You need that aggression. You need that physicality. As good of a team as Brighton are, and I think technically Caicedo is very underrated at that, to be honest. I think he's played some brilliant passes, and I think is part of the way they build up. But part of what makes Brighton such a ferocious team to come up against is their physical side. They are a well-drilled team that can outrun you and also outpass you and outthink you too. It's not just a case of having nice, aesthetically pleasing technical players. They have good technical players. Mauricio Pochettino will want to have good technical players. That is kind of a broad thing at the top level. It's those kind of ingredients that Chelsea, I think, have lacked that have mean they've been overwhelmed at times in such a key area in central midfield. It looks like Alexis McAllister is going to be moving on to Liverpool in the next week. And that is a player that I don't think Chelsea should be in for because I don't think it's a profile of midfielder that Chelsea desperately need. I mean, Liverpool need several midfielders. They don't just need a defensive midfielder. They quite clearly need a rebuild. You could argue, of course, Chelsea are looking to do the same thing. But I think in terms of what we need, in terms of what I'm looking for this summer, it's a very specific type of midfielder. It's someone who is going to be able to break up play and play in a deeper area and be able to cover for others. And Caicedo is, again, you can look at players in different ways and say they don't all operate in the same way. When we were saying in January, Caicedo, I'm trying to think of who else was linked, but we spoke about Caicedo, we spoke about Bissouma, I think, at the time from Spurs, and also Enzo Fernandez. And I stressed at the time that Enzo Fernandez is not the same as Moises Caicedo. But I think, those two in a central midfield make a lot more sense and are more balanced. And that is the key word, I think, for Chelsea. So we will see. Listen, it's the transfer window is still very early. We haven't even got the fixtures out yet, and that always feels like a telling moment in the summer. And it's I also think having discussion with Chelsea fans, it is so much about selling players. That I think we still have to get back to that, because until a lot of these players move on, until Chelsea drastically cut down the squad, as we saw this season, we can be as excited. And I know why people love the dopamine hit of a new transfer, but that doesn't mean it's going to be successful. unless you have a squad that is manageable for a coach like Pochettino without Champions League football, remember, without any European football, then you can bring in all the talent in the world you like. If it's jumbled, if it's bloated, if there are players having to, basically sit out games and sit out match day squads consistently on large fees, you're going to have major problems. And that's what Chelsea have encountered. I like the fact that Chelsea are at least looking in the areas that I think are very important. I think that central midfield is of importance. You have to try and recruit in there. I'm not having a go at in terms of where Chelsea are trying to prioritise. We know striker is probably the next one beyond that, and goalkeeper. It's quite clear those three positions, if Chelsea are going to sign players this summer, those are the three most obvious areas of need. But we need to start to lose some players too. Because until that happens, I think that still is for me a concern when you're trying to bring in new ones as well. Another player that could be moving on, one of those that could leave, that won't please people, is N'Golo Kante. And this is also from Nazar Kantella, that he's targeted for Saudi Arabia transfer as Chelsea uncertainty grows. Lionel Messi is in talks over a $320 million a year move to Saudi Arabia in what would be the most lucrative salary deal in the history of football. Kante is attractive to the Saudis because he is viewed as a Muslim role model. Ronaldo's Al Nassr are one of the clubs interested in the France World Cup winner, while Benzema's Al Ittihad are also said to be keen on a move. So we're seeing now a flurry of players this year start to move to Saudi Arabia, obviously where there is so much money to spend. And N'Golo Kante, you think about a player who's had so many injury issues in his career in recent years, and what he's won and where he's been in his career. I could understand from a career point of view, and also, let's just be blunt, a financial point of view. You have that, lifestyle thrown at you. You have that money thrown at you. And I could understand at his age why he may want to move on. It's weird to me because it seemed like, as recently, as long back as kind of at Christmas time, around those, it seemed like Chelsea had kind of progressed quite significantly with N'Golo Kante, and it seemed like it's going to kind of be a foregone conclusion. Kante will stay an extra year, at least an extra 2 years, dependent on the contract, but it seems like it's gone in the other direction. And I've gone back and forth in terms of why I think Kante, there are major concerns around his fitness, and that you can't rely on him for a season. Chelsea can't walk into next season still thinking that we have to pray that Kante stays fit, because that's not a viable strategy anymore. That doesn't mean that he can't offer some brilliant performances, but it means that Chelsea need to keep investing in midfield and have players ready to take the mantle when he does leave Chelsea. Could be right now, could be in a couple of years down the line when if he signs that new contract. But it's understandable because, Karim Benzema has already been attracted to it, and Cristiano Ronaldo too. Not sure if Messi will, because it seems like he wants to go back to Barcelona, but it shows, very much that there's an intent there, and Kante at the end of his career getting close to that can be given the money that he kind of wants and desires, and whether he wants to jump at that is obviously going to be a big question. So it means that Chelsea maybe have to be a little bit more proactive, and maybe goes back to the Ugarte thing of not having that player, because there were talks that even if Chelsea signed Manuel Ugarte, there'd still be a push to sign another central midfielder on top of that. Does that mean that without Ugarte, and if Kante leaves, are Chelsea looking to sign two midfielders still? I mean, and who would that other midfielder be if we're assuming that Caicedo is going to be one of the key targets? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea. Make sure to give the podcast a positive rating review. Really does help out. Subscribe, like, all of that good stuff. And I'll see you again very soon. All the best.